Welcome, welcome. This is Gull, your money mindset expert. And once again, we have the amazing, the wonderful, the charming Scott Perry. Welcome, Scott.
Hey, Gull, great to be with you again.
Thank you so much for coming back, Scott. We had such a fantastic conversation with you on Friday Feature that we had to have you back today. So, Scott, everyone's heard your intro, but please, in your own words, tell everybody what it is that you do.
Sure, I am an Encore Life Coach at Creative on Purpose, which is an endeavor dedicated to helping people that are 45 or older find fulfillment, forge meaning, and make a difference in their life's third act through some sort of entrepreneurial enterprise that leverages the wisdom and experience that they've earned making a living and raising a family.
Fabulous, fabulous. And today we're talking about how your money is just your story. Now, I thought when we were discussing the topics, this is such a perfect topic. Not only does it suit our podcast series as well, but I think especially in I find because I do talk to people, from over 45 all the way to 70 to 80. I do have clients in that age range. And I find that a lot of them have the same negative story, and it actually progressively gets worse. So what has your experience been with people progressively as they get older when their money stories?
Well, I think too often we are living our money story completely unconsciously or at best subconsciously. We are
Absolutely. Yeah.
our stories about ourselves, about our situation are informed and inspired by, first our parents and then our friends and neighbors, society at large, and then we go to school, where we're surrounded with more people that are informing and inspiring our relationship with money. We live in a culture that makes money kind of the object of life, and you know, it really takes, I think, some effort and some intention to take a hard, cold look at what this money thing is and to call it out for what it really is. And
Mm.
what it is it's a human construct. It's a story. It's a story that that persists because we all, to some degree, believe in it.
Yeah.
But it didn't exist until human beings brought it into existence.
I think that's very important to remember, along with the fact that a lot of the times this story isn't your story. It was given to you and it was subconsciously programmed into you by your primary caregivers, mostly your parents, but whoever it was between the ages of 0 to 7. And they did not know that they were programming it into you because it was programmed into them. So this has been passed on from generations to generations. And unless someone actively changes that story consciously or subconsciously, because you can do it subconsciously as well, you just start thinking differently, behaving differently, you start learning different experiences, and you just are like start thinking out of the box. But 95% of the population doesn't do that. A small minority do. So if you haven't actively looked at your money story, you've actually passed it on. In your experience, I think it'd be even more relevant for your audience because they've passed it on to their kids. And they will find, my experience tells me this, if their children do not work on their stories, when their children turn from early 30s to early 40s, will have what I call snapback. And they will start reliving their life according to their money stories, which was given to them by yourselves, And so this cycle continues forever and ever and ever. So how do you first recognize this, and how do you teach your clients that they have a money story? Because a lot of people who come to you, they're like, what money story? What do you mean money story? What story are you talking about? What is this?
Well, the folks, just to step back a second, to because you said you shared some things that are worth highlighting and are
Yeah.
really insightful. Um, to which I'd only add, I believe that people are doing the best they can, and they're doing what
Absolutely.
they need to do
Absolutely.
almost all the time. Now, it might not really be promoting their health and happiness or yours, but by and large, with the rare exception of the full-blown psychopath or sociopath, nobody wakes up and says, boy, oh boy, I sure hope I can cause some misery and suffering in someone's life today. Um, you know, my parents, I grew up in the 60s and 70s in the very middle of the middle class, when the middle class actually still kind of existed here in the United States. And, although we never wanted for anything, there was a lot of scarcity,
Mm.
uh, kind of promoted around money, and I don't, I don't discredit my parents at all for that. My
No.
father worked very hard to provide, put us in safe neighborhoods and nice houses and cars that, stayed tuned up and running. So just want to kind of highlight that. Now, to your question about, how do you help people see their money story and see how it is actually inhibiting their flourishing. Um, you know, I think again it begins with what you were saying earlier. We our system is built on status and salary, right?
Mm.
We are creatures. Well, all human beings are two contradictory things at the same time. We like to fit in. We like to know where we stand and what's expected. So our status stories are often around, how do I stay right where I am? Because even if it's not the happiest or healthiest place, I understand what to do here. I know
Mm.
who's above me. I know who's below me. I know who's equal to me. That's a very human thing. Um, and we are also creatures that had this aspirational nature. We like exploring the edges of our understanding and ability. We like exploring uncertainty and the unknown. And these two things are being held in our head at the same time. And we all have natural proclivities for being more one than the other. And even though there's a lot of nature and nurture going on, we also have the ability to take control of what's within our control. And so last time we spoke, we were talking about this.
Mm.
We can control, we can decide to frame our perceptions about ourselves, our situation, our relationship with things like money, and start to look at them more objectively.
Mhm.
And that's one of the things that's probably the primary thing that I teach around money stories and all the other things that hold us back. Let's find out what's true.
Mm.
And what's true is what's happening right now without any of the adjectives and adverbs, without any of the value judgments,
Mm.
right? So, if you have a story that, I grew up poor,
Mm.
I've never caught a break. I'm never going to make, more than my parents did. You are making that story true, but
Yes.
it's not objectively true. And
Mm.
so, you can just begin by saying, right now, I am making the kind of living that my parents made before me. That's what's true. And if you start with what is true, then you can start to frame your opportunities and possibilities a little more objectively. And you can decide if you're ready to start living into a better story, a story that promotes your health and happiness. And we talked about this a little bit last time too. You have to decide, what do you really want? Because we live in a society that rewards fame and fortune.
Mm.
But fame and fortune are not inherent goods in and of themselves. They're actually just amplifiers. If you were a terrible person before you became rich and famous, you will be a more terrible person when you're rich and famous. If you were a good and giving person before you had fame and fortune, you will be more of a good
Mm.
person when you have fame and fortune. So that's not the object. That's just a result
Mm.
that's not within your control that you may or may not get.
Mm.
And it is an indicator of nothing, really, in terms of who you really are. And if you decide instead that you want to put prosperity first, I think that's different than profitability.
Mm,
Prosperity means that you have a life that is filled with joy, connection, love, a gratitude for all that you already possess, a generous, compassionate spirit, doing what you can when you can with and for the people that are around you. That's a prosperous life. And if you put prosperity, a greater sense of prosperity, in front of the profitability, I think it's possible to get both if that's what you want. But if you put prosperity first, you will be on the path to to cultivating the content of your character and to becoming a better person. And so if and when profitability comes, you will be one of those people that is amplifying the better angels of your nature.
mm. I think one of the major things that people struggle with when it comes to money stories is understanding um, the paradigms. A lot of the times we are so blinded by our money stories, and we have these set paradigms, we don't realize they are paradigms. And so it's literally walking around with these these tinted glasses, not being aware that they are tinted. So I think the first awareness that I would have thought that you would bring into them is make them aware
Mhm.
they are walking with these tinted glasses, good or bad. It's not, that's the judgment call for later. How it got there is not just up for discussion. It's, they're there, and for them to recognize, because you can't give them that awareness, they have to have awareness from themselves, that they are walking around with these preconceived ideas, which is which is actually dictating what they actually see in life. Because remember, because of basic our paradigms and with our perceptions of how the world works, we may or may not see opportunities. A lot of the time, especially if people are used to, I mean, I don't listen to the news, I haven't for good 20, 30 years. But if you're one of those people who has to listen to the news and it's daily fed this fear mongering and everything's going to pots and the crypto market's crashed and it's all a fraud and the stock market's crashing and the property prices are going high and the inflation, you're literally fed all these lies like, oh my God, how am I going to afford my bread tomorrow? Forget anything else. Yet if you take a step back and realize these are just economic cycles and it's been there all along and there is a reason for it, and you can always get through it, you would have a calmer perception about what's going around the world. It's when we feel really out of control, like everything's out of my control. I don't control the prices. I don't control the petrol prices, which everyone's talking about. But all we can control is ourselves and how we view the world. What do you think of that?
Yeah, well, you've almost exactly illustrated a process that we teach all the time in the work we do at Creative on Purpose and what I do as an Encore Life Coach, which is we call it notice, name, navigate. The first
Okay.
thing you have to do is bring your consciousness into the conversation, and you have to see that there's something amiss. You have to notice that there is something going on that is not promoting your health and happiness.
Mm.
Once you notice that, once you brought your awareness to it, then you need to name it in a way that is objective, fair, and true.
Mm.
Get rid of the adjectives and adverbs, get rid of the value judgments. It's something that is happening. That's all it is. And once you objectively name it, you can also start to objectively see the opportunities in whatever obstacle you're facing. And you can decide to navigate it with intention, with integrity, and um, and do that in a way that aligns with who you really are, leverage what you're really good at, and do it with and for the people that are around you where you really belong. And so, yes, to your point, it's hard. That first step is the hardest step, right? Because we would rather, one of the stories that you and I probably hear most frequently is the victim story.
Yeah.
This is happening to me.
Mm.
Life is happening to me. To which I always tell people, well, that is true. If you want life to be happening to you, life will continue to happen to you. But if you want life to happen through you,
Mm.
you need to become an active agent in your destiny. We were talking about this a little bit in our last conversation. This where you and I are kind of aligned. We just use different words.
Yeah.
You and I, I'm losing the actual name is the manifesting. Um, I call it destiny. And this
Mm.
comes again from we talked about Stoic philosophy in our last conversation. The Stoics believed that everything was unfolding the way it was intended to unfold, that
Mhm.
life is causal. Now, to something that you said last time, that may sound like it invites people to take the lazy way. Well,
Mhm.
if destiny is going to happen, why don't I just sit back and wait for it to happen?
Yeah.
If I put my abundant thoughts out into the universe, why don't I just sit and wait for the universe to reward me for having a thought, right? That's not the way it works, because destiny is unfolding, but the moment that you're in, although a fated moment, it's what was going to happen anyways. That is the moment where you can have some influence. That is the invitation and the opportunity for you to build character and align your decisions and actions, your perceptions with your values, talents, and your scene. And you can then become an agent of your destiny, and you can take the next step with a little bit more integrity and intention, and that's your reward.
Mm.
The reward is in the quality of your efforts and actions, not in the results. Those don't belong to you. They may or may not occur. And if they do, you shouldn't exult too much, because the next step may end up very differently. And if they don't, you don't need to despair, because you're in a new place where there are a new opportunity to frame your perceptions, choose, make a decision, and take a bold step, small step into whatever's going to happen next.
I love that. I love this idea that don't be attached, good or bad way, to the results, because if they're great, don't be too enthusiastic about it, and if they're bad, don't, or you perceive them to be bad, don't be too despondent about it. Both things can change, as the case will be, and that's how life cycle does work. I'm going to go back to this idea that you've said about destiny. I too believe there are destinies, but then I think I'll go on a bit of deeper level. I do believe there are multiple dimensions and multiple realities. And the way I see it is based on your actions, your thoughts, your intention, and your actions, you're pulling a particular reality to you. At any given moment in time, multiple realities are taking place. And based on your decision, I'm going to take action, I'm not going to take action. If you take action, this reality will become your destiny. If you said, now I'm going to sit on my backside and wait for, my partner or somebody or the God to drop a bag of, gold into my lap, then this reality becomes your destiny. And so you're pulling your particular destiny to yourself based on your intentions and your thoughts, ideas, and your actions, because they dictate your actions. I think this is how I like to see, and this is what I talk about, because I do believe there is an unfoldment of your destiny. There is. I would not be here if there wasn't some superpower taking me here. There have been parts in my life which have been horrendous. If it was me, I would wipe them out. I don't want to go through those. But going through those has developed my character to its I think most of my character. One thing people often say in my family, oh, she's so strong, she'll do it. Well, the point is, I had no option but to be strong, and losing my mother at 21 was probably the start of it. But I didn't choose for mom to die at 21. It's destiny. I didn't choose to be in 2 abusive marriages, trying to be this good Muslim girl, and but that was destiny. And then that's when when you realize there's certain paths you walk down, but if I look back in hindsight, the decisions were mine. I have to take ownership. I can't blame anybody else for it. It was my decision. No one forced me into the marriages. Yes, it was arranged marriage, but no one forced put knife to my head. I said yes for whatever reasoning, stupid reasoning I had, but I said yes. So it's my decision and I have to deal with the consequences. But that also means I'm responsible for my life right now. I think one of the biggest things that people like to give to others is responsibility for their life circumstances. My father did this, and my uncle did this, and my brother did this, and my mother did this, and my wife did this, and my husband did this. And when we give that responsibility for our life circumstances onto someone else, we give away our power. And until we take that responsibility back, we're not going to be in a position to change our money stories. Don't you agree?
Yeah, well, you're pointing to something that you and I probably share in the work that we do, is that really ultimately our primary job is to help other people see, step into, stay in, and share their power
Mm,
over their thoughts, decisions, and actions. It
mm,
ultimately comes down to that. And whether it's, through the law of attraction or Stoic philosophy, or however, um, whatever story you're using to live a more bountiful, flourishing, thriving life, you have to be the primary actor, right? You have to
mm,
have, authority has the word author in it. You have to
mm,
take authority over being the author of your story.
mm.
And
I love that. I love that. Taking, authority on, in terms of being the author of your story, because we are writing our stories every single day.
well, and you also illustrated something really beautiful, Gull, in sharing, the story of your being involved in two abusive marriages. You are not absolving yourself of responsibility for being, and that's, I love telling people that shame is an invitation you do not have to accept. We
Mm,
often think of guilt as something that comes from within, and shame is something that comes from without. But I think it can work. Both can work from the outside in or from the inside out.
yeah,
We are often accepting the invitation to feel shame about ourselves based on what other people think or based
yeah,
on
yeah.
our interpretation. And you don't have to accept that. It can be something that happened.
Mm,
And you illustrated something else really powerful, which is you can't get stronger if you never meet resistance.
absolutely,
When you are
100%.
building muscle, you increase the resistance. When you want to get stronger, you increase the resistance. Now, you don't go from 5-pound weights to 500-pound weights, but again, thoughtful, deliberate, bold, focused, disciplined pursuit of seeing, stepping into, staying in, and sharing your power. That's how change happens. Small, intentional steps taken every day, committed, and done with compassion for yourself and
Mm.
compassion for others. You can practice compassion from the inside out.
I love that. I love what you said, and I think this is an important element to remember, because a lot of people have shame around their money too. They have this idea, because if they've come, because this podcast is heard by a lot of corporate people, or ex-corporate people, people with the corporate background, and that we have a lifestyle that we have to keep up the appearances, and the dress code and the lifestyle and the cars, and a lot of people buy into that false story. And so you have to have certain lifestyle, certain car, or something else, and then they get themselves into debt. And the money story is really, really messed up.
Mm.
It's when they come to retirement, very few people actually have a good retirement plan. They've messed up because the money story has been messed up throughout the years. They have a lot of shame because they don't want to share this, because they've been earning 200, 300K, and they're like, how can I be in debt when I've been earning so much money? So there's shame around that too. And I share this because only you can decide if you're going to accept that shame or own it. I remember when in my culture, because I come from the South Asian culture, for us to have one divorce is bad. I've got two. And I've got one child from each marriage. It's like, oh my God, that's horrendous. That's the most shameful thing you can possibly imagine. And I'm supposed to be the good girl. I'm a good girl, apparently. So how can I be a good girl if I can't have that? Anyway, the point is, the very first thing I did, I owned it. I went public. And I remember my ex saying this to me very, very blatantly. I remember, and I'm going to share the story with part of it. He said to me, after, because he cheated on me and I caught him red-handed and everything else, and he'd been very abusive all these years. His exact words were, and this is my second husband, he said, even after everything I've done, his exact words, even after everything I've done, Gull, no one's going to blame me. Everyone's going to say, you got married twice, you got divorced twice. People are going to call your children kids of a divorcee who's been divorced twice. His exact words, exact words. So it doesn't matter who, what I've done wrong or what I did to you, people will blame me. And the sad fact of this is, now here's the sad fact. My culture, he's bang on. My culture, South Asian culture, bang on. Especially people back in Pakistan, India would think of that. So and I felt the shame of what he said to me, even though I didn't do anything wrong. I was like the perfect wife and whatever else. I felt that because, and the reason why I said, because he didn't want to leave me. He didn't want a divorce. He didn't want to divorce me. I left him. He wanted to keep me and the other one. So I went public. I went on my Facebook and I opened up publicly to everyone. And I made it obviously I've made my profile public by then, for everyone to hear. This is what's happened to me. This is what he did. I'm not, and this is my second marriage, and I owned my ugly. I call it own thy ugly. I call that's what I call it, this phraseology, own thy ugly. When you accept the deepest, darkest, most shameful part of you, and especially when it comes to your money as well, a lot of people have, I had it around this marriage, but a lot of people have around the money. As long as you can own it, really own that, okay, I screwed up. I made a business and I messed up $100,000. I tried to, have this company ended up being 100,000 debt, whatever your most shameful element is of the story, as long as you own it, you take away its power to rule you. And this is what I find, because I went public in front of everyone and I told everyone about it. I talk about it because it has, I actually take pride in it, the fact that I've come out the other end of two highly abusive marriages. And the second one was even more abusive, and I stayed in there for this reason, because I didn't want to have a second divorce on my name. But I now see it as a badge of honor. It's part of my scarring. Like, when you get a scar from something, or a really deep wound, but then you got a scar from it, like you can show, like, I've got a scar from it. That's how I see it. But I chose to see those instances in my life as those scars, and I can show my scars of bravery rather than shameful scars. Does it make sense? What I mean?
No, it makes perfect sense. And that one of the things that I have seen in working with clients is that it is often the waking up that there is a better way to engage with your life and to find your true soul's purpose. It often is precipitated by a catastrophe of some sort. And there are some people, any life worth living is fraught. There will be failure, there will be suffering.
Yes.
And those are also the opportunities for us to wake up and reconsider who we are and who we wish to become. And, it's very, very frequently that someone, is entirely broken by a situation, a circumstance, and they decide that they're not going to remain broken, but they are going to become broken open and allow their true selves to emerge. And I think a lot about, a lot of people use language around reinvention at this point in life, the third act, the second half of life, whatever you want to call it. And I don't see it that way. Because I think we can, we are very forward facing as a species. We are focused on our becoming. And in the first half of life, our becoming is determined by external instructions and validation. In the second half of life, if we're doing it right, our becoming is based on internal exploration and validation. But we can't become. Our becoming is out there. It's in the being, the right here and now, that we have an opportunity to start to emerge into our becoming. But here's the thing that a lot of people don't think about is we also have the past, and we don't look at the past very often because there's a lot of a lot of just sadness or suffering associated with our, what we've been.
Mm.
But I always encourage people to look back, and I mean, of course, there are people that have had truly traumatic, abusive childhoods. But if you go back far enough, you can probably, regardless of your situation or circumstances, your upbringing, you can find some moments where you were fully and wholly yourself.
Mm.
What were the things that lit you up as a child? Spending time in nature, creating, drawing, reading, telling stories, hanging out with, and if you look at the entirety of your journey, like we're often very caught up in what's happening right now and defining ourselves, making all our decisions based on reacting to
Mm.
what's happening right now. But if we look at the arc of the journey, there's often a theme that we can find, a thread that unifies the whole thing. And I, I would encourage anyone tuning in to think about that. What's the theme of your life? And what's the genre of your
Mm.
life's journey, right? Because if your genre is tragedy, then you're going to live a tragedy. But if your genre is action adventure, then maybe it will be a little bit more fun. And I think that's another element of this is we tend to take ourselves very, very seriously, often too seriously. And I think having a sense of playfulness about the idea that, that we get to do this, like life is a gift and we get to do whatever we want to do with it. And that there has to be an element of play because it's not always going to work out. We have to be willing to explore options, try things that might not work. And if we approach it with that childlike sense of awe and wonder, and if we try to stay connected to who we really are, which is we are social creatures that
Mm.
have the capacity for reason and consciousness and have a creative instinct, we can define, or we can at least become accomplices and allies in our own becoming, and
Mm.
we will have some control over the journey. So, number one, want to applaud that you had the self-awareness to own your role in the decisions and the things that happened to you in the past, and to not use that as an excuse to become the victim or to beat yourself up and stay where you were.
Mhm.
I think that's a very, very brave approach, and all too rare, especially for women in the cultures that you and I come from or
Mm.
live in. Um, and this is the gift that you're sharing in your work.
Yes.
And I think you and I both are doing work based on the interesting problem that we've been solving for ourselves. And that's how most worthwhile endeavors are built, whether it's as a young entrepreneur or as an older encorepreneur.
Mm.
What's the problem that you've solved for yourself? And you are clearly going to be a chapter or two ahead of others. And how can you turn around and help someone else climb out, offer them a step up the ladder, so that they can start to emerge from what they've been and start to step into who they would like to be.
Lovely, fantastic. And I think that's absolutely it. You have you we're lifelong learners, and I think none of us can say we've arrived. We're just maybe a step or two ahead of someone behind us, and therefore we know how to guide them, and that's probably the best way to guide them, to come along and see what else is available out there, because there is so much available and there's so much more potential, but maybe they're lower down and they can't see the horizon from where we are. We're able to stand and sort of observe. But on that note, I think we're going to wrap this up. So Any parting comments, Scott, about how to deal with our money stories?
I think the thing that I always return to around any of the stories that I'm telling myself that are not cultivating greater health and happiness in my life is to take a moment to um, to express some gratitude for the things that you already possess. If you are listening to this broadcast, you have all of your existential needs covered, and you have, what you do with the surplus. That's up to you. And, to what you were saying earlier, take that moment to be grateful for where you are and what you have. Maybe um, start to tell yourselves truer stories about how you got into the situation that you're now in, and then set an intention for where you want to be, and start stepping into empowering yourself to be the author of your experience, and take small steps every day into that possibility. But always, I think, when we start with gratitude, then it's easier for us to be more generous to ourselves and more generous to others. And I think gratitude and generosity are two of the levers that will most promote anyone's sense of thriving and flourishing in this life.
Wonderful. Fabulous. And so tell Scott, where can we find you? How can we connect with you on the internet?
So I'm very easy to find on the internet. If you go to creativeonpurpose.com, you will be able to learn more about the art of Encore Living. There's a free quick start guide if you'd like to grab that. If you'd like to get on a free strategy call to help define where you are, where you want to be, what is really in your way, and get unstuck and start navigating through the challenges in your life, I'd love to have that conversation with you as well.
Wonderful. And so if you're listening to us on the podcast, then the links, as Scott has just mentioned, will be in the show notes. And if you're watching us on YouTube, and down below in the description section, rather, you will have us linked to. Thank you so much, Scott, for coming. And it's been such an interesting, in-depth conversation today. I've thoroughly enjoyed myself. So thank you so much for coming.
It's been a thrill and a privilege, Gull. Thank you so much for this and for the difference that you make.
Thank you so much. And thank you for listening to me and Scott and having a really, really interesting conversation. I really enjoyed it. I will be back with another amazing guest, picking their brains and finding out how you and I can build a better business. Until the next time we meet, this is Gull signing off. Take care.